IELTS Listening. Section 4. You will hear a lecturer giving a lecture about the psychology of consumer behavior. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now we shall begin. You should answer the question as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer the questions.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today we'll explore the fascinating psychological mechanisms behind consumer decision-making. Understanding these principles helps explain why we often buy things we don't need and make choices that defy logic. Let's begin with perhaps the most powerful driver of all. What truly motivates most purchases isn't practical need but emotion. While we like to believe we make rational choices, studies show that feelings override logic in about 90% of purchasing decisions. Advertisers frequently tap into our desires for status, belonging, or self-image. Interestingly, even major investments like cars or homes are often emotionally driven, though buyers typically invent logical justifications afterwards. A peculiar cognitive bias called the endowment phenomenon causes people to ascribe greater value to items simply because they own them. In experiments, participants demanded significantly more money to sell a mug they'd just received than they were willing to pay to acquire one. This effect explains why secondhand sellers often overprice their goods and why free trials are so effective. Once we own something temporarily, we're reluctant to give it up. Creating time-sensitive promotions is one of retail's most reliable tactics. When shoppers encounter phrases like "offer ends soon" or see ticking countdown clocks, they experience mounting psychological pressure to act quickly. This carefully engineered sensation of urgency overrides normal decision-making processes, leading to what we call impulse purchases. Interestingly, the actual time remaining matters less than the mere suggestion of scarcity. Even false deadlines can trigger this effect. Product placement capitalizes on our implicit memory systems. When we see a celebrity drinking a particular brand in a movie, we form unconscious associations that can surface days later in a store. This explains why familiar brands feel more trustworthy, even when we can't recall why we recognize them. The most effective placements are subtle enough to avoid conscious resistance while still creating positive associations. Restaurant menus frequently employ the decoy effect by including one overpriced item that makes others seem reasonable. A $15 glass of wine appears extravagant until placed next to a $35 option, making it suddenly seem sensible. Technology companies use similar strategies with product tiers, where the middle option is carefully positioned to appear as the most balanced choice. The influence of social proof manifests most clearly in luxury markets. When consumers see influencers or respected figures using a product, they're willing to pay premium prices for the perceived social validation. This explains the success of celebrity endorsements and user-generated content campaigns. Interestingly, the effect strengthens when the admired individuals aren't paid promoters but genuine users. Fast food chains didn't choose their color schemes randomly. Red triggers urgency and stimulates appetite, while yellow evokes happiness and visibility. These carefully selected hues work on our subconscious, explaining why changing a call to action button from green to red can increase conversions by over 20%. Different cultures do associate colors with varying meanings, requiring localized marketing approaches. Neuroscience reveals that paying activates the same brain regions that process physical pain. Contactless payments and digital wallets reduce this discomfort by creating psychological distance from the spending act. This explains why people spend more with credit cards than cash, and why subscription models are so effective. The recurring charges feel less painful than large one-time payments. Now let's examine why prices so often end in 99 rather than rounding up. This strategy, known as charm pricing, exploits how our brains process numbers from left to right. While a $4.99 item is effectively $5, consumers perceive it as closer to $4 because we read digit by digit. Retailers have found that odd-ending prices like $197 outperform round numbers like $200, even though the difference is minimal. Luxury brands sometimes invert this tactic, using round figures to convey premium quality, but for most everyday goods, that charm of the 99 ending persists as a powerful psychological tool. Modern consumers face an overwhelming paradox of choice. When presented with dozens of nearly identical products, they often experience decision fatigue, a state of mental exhaustion that impairs judgment. This explains why shoppers might spend hours comparing laptops online only to abandon their carts. Retailers combat this by offering curated editor's picks or best-for-in categories. Interestingly, fatigue sets in faster when options differ only slightly, like 40 shades of white paint versus distinctly different colors. These psychological principles demonstrate how consumer behavior often follows predictable but irrational patterns. Understanding these mechanisms helps both marketers create effective strategies and consumers make more conscious decisions. As we've seen, much of what we consider free will in shopping is actually a complex interplay of cognitive biases and emotional triggers.
That is the end of Section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Please make sure you have transferred all your answers to the answer sheet correctly. The listening test is now over. You may now proceed to the reading section.